Hey everybody, today we're going to take a look at some eccentric camber bushings made by KMAC for the BMW F2x and F3x chassis vehicles. Now if you're wondering why we're looking at some dirty used parts instead of fresh shiny new ones, well, it's because I've had these on my vehicle for the past 24,730 miles, and since I've gone to the Millway camber plates, I don't need these anymore for camber adjustment. So I've ended up going with some VAC monoballs for this control arm instead of this metal and poly eccentric bushing. So let's take a look at the components, how they go together, install in the control arm, and allow you to adjust camber. So first we have a bolt with a D-shaped cross section here. You can see the nice flat there. We have an end nut. We have two of these washers with a D-shaped opening and teeth on them. We've got a couple polyurethane caps and some more washers with teeth and a curved inside. And then we have the main bushing body itself with some grease grooves, and it's like chromed. So the way this works is you take your control arm and you have to press out the rubber bushing that's in there originally, and KMAC actually supplies a tool with this package to do that. It's basically a cup that braces against the arm itself, and then there's a threaded rod that comes through and like a pressing device along with another nut, and you tighten the nut which presses the bushing through the control arm. And you have to take a look at these control arms, and if you look over here on this side, you can see that the edge right here is actually tapered, and that's how you can figure out what side you're supposed to press the bushing out from. So this side, if you can see it, it's just like a sharp corner, and this side's tapered. So the bushing was pressed in from this side, so it needs to be pressed out from the same side. So when you put your pressing cup on, you put the cup on this side with that taper, and then this is the side you would tighten the nut to push the bushing through the control arm and out. So after the bushing's out, we have to assemble this new guy, and we'll start by taking the cylinder. KMAC supplies you with grease, so take a healthy amount and put it all around the cylinder. And then you'll need to take the end caps, and these end caps, they just fit over the cylinder like so. And only put one on there, because if you put two, well, you're not going to be able to put it in the control arm. So after you have that one, then you can go ahead and put the cap and control arm, or sorry, put the cap and the main body of the bushing inside of the control arm. You can see it goes in without too much drama, not too difficult. And then you can go ahead and take the other polyurethane end cap and slide that over and put it inside the control arm. So once the polyurethane end caps and the main bushing body are in the control arm, if you look at it this way, you can see that there's some of that main cylinder, main bushing body sticking out of both sides, and you want it to be that way because you're going to next have to put these end washers on, and you can see they're tapered, curved on the inside so that they just fit right over the assembly like so. And then the teeth on the cylinder and the teeth on this end washer here are the same height. And speaking of these end washers here, look at just how clean they are after just about 25,000 miles on my vehicle. So this design actually does quite a good job of keeping out dirt and grime from the interface of this polyurethane cap and these end washers. And another thing I should mention too is if you look at these end caps on mine, they look kind of rough and like not very well shaped and kind of dirty. Well, that's just dried grease on them. But when I received these, I was a beta tester for them, and the end caps were actually too large. So what I actually had to do for my particular set is I took my Dremel and I actually ground down a lot of this so that it fit the taper of these washers perfectly. This should be fixed now in the release version. I mean, it's been, you know, a year and a half, 2 years since I initially did the beta on these. So I'm pretty confident that those issues have been worked out after the feedback that I submitted. But anyhow, I would recommend putting some grease on this interface right here so that the end washers and the polyurethane caps have some lubricant on them, in addition to, you know, when you lubricate the main cylinder body bushing for these polyurethane caps. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to put the control arm assembly into the car, and I want you to just pretend that these two little hexes here are the mount for this control arm in the subframe. So this assembly with these end washers and, you know, the polyurethane caps and the main bushing themselves, this is going to go between the mounts in the subframe. And then what you'll do is you'll take your bolt, put one of the bite washers with the D-shaped hole on it over there, and then you're going to insert it through the outside of the subframe mount and through the inside of this main body of the bushing. And once that protrudes through the other side, well, then you can go ahead and put the other bite washer on, and then finally secure it with the end nut. And then for the torque spec here, you'll just use the exact same torque spec as the OE piece, which is 100 Newton meters, about 75 foot-pounds. This is not a torque to yield bolt, so don't put the extra 90 degrees on it. So once this is on the car, how are you able to adjust the camber? Well, you will go to your bolt over here, and before you clamp this other side down and torque it down, you can take your 18mm wrench and use that to spin this bolt. And you can see as I turn the bolt, it's changing the location of where that hole is in relation to the rest of the arm. So right now, you know, putting the hole over here, what I've done is I've shortened the arm. I've essentially pulled this towards the car. And then if this is moved out here, then I've pushed out the arm. And what that geometry does for your wheel, if we assume that my right hand here is the knuckle and my left hand here is that control arm, well, if we lengthen it, so if we push this hole all the way over to this side and make the arm longer, then what we've done is we've now pushed out the bottom of the knuckle and angled it like so, and that's what gives you your extra camber. And the max amount of camber I was able to achieve with these on my X-Drive vehicle was about minus 1.8 degrees. And depending on how much you have lowered your car, if at all, I have seen people get out to minus 2 degrees of camber. So if you're opposed to camber plates, because you don't want the clunky noises that they have the potential to provide, I think these are actually a really good option. And this lower control arm and bushing assembly, it's the same whether you have a rear wheel drive or X-Drive. So, you know, this is really a nice solution that you can use, you know, with multiple models and not have to worry about compatibility. So one of the other really nice things about this design is the fact that there are these end washers supporting the full head of the polyurethane caps. If you've seen my other video showing a Super Pro polyurethane bushing, so Super Pro also makes these polyurethane bushings that allow you to adjust camber for these arms, but they don't have these end washers that fully support the head. And one of my other videos, I showed how the polyurethane was just kind of like deteriorating or falling apart, and the rigidity of the polyurethane itself, these caps, was not enough, and it was allowing the arm to move back and forth like so. Like I could just grab the wheel, wiggle it back and forth, and get this to move. So the fact that KMAC has these metal washers supporting the polyurethane is really a design win in my opinion. And you know, these arms have been rock solid the entire time I've had them, you know, doing plenty of street driving, off-road driving, and lots of track time. So I would say, you know, taking these off at 25,000 miles and inspecting it, these have done a very good job of holding up, and I'm really not concerned about their longevity. Additionally, when I was trying to take this arm off, the teeth in these washers, you know, you can see the teeth over here, the teeth on this main cylinder, and the teeth on these like securing clamp or bite washers on the outside, those did a very good job of holding this eccentric bushings position on the subframe mount. So, you know, I was talking about subframe mount goes here and it gets sandwiched between the main cylinder, this outer washer, and the bite washer. Even after loosening the bolt, this thing did not want to come out very easily because these teeth had dug into that metal so well. And you know, I've done so many alignments with these. These things have never shifted at all. I know eccentric bushings are known for, you know, potentially shifting over time or track use or whatever. These guys have never budged. So all that said, I think this is a really good solution if you don't want to go to camber plates. But that said, there are still some downsides. And the first one I'm going to say is, you know, if you just look at this interface here, all the grease is dried up. And what is polyurethane like notorious for? Well, making some squeaky, creaky noises. And these absolutely did do that to some extent. Here, I'll go play a video from my dash cam for you. So, you know, you heard some creaking there when I was backing out of my driveway and turning the wheel all the way. And quite frankly, that's really the only time I ever heard this creaking is, you know, when I was slowly backing out the car and then turning the wheel full lock. You know, whenever I was driving or if I had the radio on, I never heard these at all. It was really only that one scenario where I'm backing out of my driveway and turning the wheel full lock. The sound, yes, it's annoying, but it was also plenty livable. The second downside of this design, and this is not actually going to apply to everybody, it's absolutely not going to apply to rear-wheel drive guys, is depending on how much you've lowered your car, these can actually make this lower arm assembly so long on an X-Drive car that it'll cause your front half shafts to pop out. So obviously that's a pretty expensive repair. You can see, you know, Keys Motorsports experience with that. He used M3 lower control arms on his X-Drive, which kind of did the same thing and lengthened the assembly so much that caused his front half shafts to pop out. You know, on my car, I was able to max these out and I didn't have that problem. But I've also, you know, haven't really lowered my front more than an inch. And in all the cases I've seen, people were using H&R lowering springs or something else and going very low, like, you know, more than an inch. So if you're going less than an inch, you probably don't have to worry about that. If you're going more than an inch of lowering, I would proceed with caution if trying to max out this camber adjustment. So that's about all there really is to say about these. As you can see, you know, they've served me well for 25,000 miles, worked as designed, and have held up. So, you know, they get a solid recommendation from me, and that's that. Thanks.